What's going on, y'all? So we're back for another video on the channel. Apologies for the brief hiatus. Things get a little hectic around this time of year, and I kind of had a hard time getting recording and stuff done to make videos to upload. So hopefully with this year 2021 wrapping up and 2022 coming along, I'll be able to push out some better, more consistent and better content as we go along in the year. But this video is my top 10 books that I read this year. So like I said, I think I read a little more than 50. I don't know the exact number, but the last time I know I hit my reading goal in October. So it may be 60 or so books, but this is my top 10 for 2021. So like I said, there's a good mix here. I read a lot of fiction, I read a lot of nonfiction, so you got a little bit of everything mixed in here. So number 10 for this year is Mark Danielewski's House of Leaves. Let me tell you, this book is for lack of a better word, mindfuck. This book is a psychological horror novel that tells the story of the Navidson family, or the Navidson record, which this family moves into a house, and they soon realize that the house is changing, and it's changing in structure, and all kinds of weird stuff is happening. And so it's a very multi-layered story, because then someone is writing the Navidson record, and then someone finds the writing of the Navidson record and is like taking notes and writing their own footnotes and stuff. So it gets super layered, it gets super complicated. But what makes this book stand out to me is just the general creativity. This was an experimental novel, and I needed to shift around so I can show you some of this. So the book is designed to mess with you as you read it. So like you can see just these pages where there's strange structures, and pages where there's just some randomness here. That the page, you got to flip the book around. There's points in the book where you're reading it with a mirror. And like I said, this is a book I want to talk more about later on when I get a chance to really sit down and dive into what makes this book good. It has its flaws, it does. It's a hefty book. It reads pretty quick, but there's times in it where it really slows down. But like I said, just the sheer creativity and like the level of thought that went in this book shot it up there for me. And it's such an interesting book, and there's a lot to talk about with it that I hope to get to at some point this year. So it brings in number 10 for my top 10 books of 2021. Next, so these next few books are going to be, these next three I believe are my nonfiction books, with the exception of one other. So for those of you who don't know, in college I was a biological sciences major, so anything in that realm of biology is something I'm super interested in reading. Biology, chemistry, and that realm I love to read about. And so these next three books are going to be kind of in that realm. So they're not going to be for everyone, but for me, it's just hits my niche, and I just love it. So number 9 is going to be The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And this is by Mr. Oliver Sacks, the late great author, who is a practicing physician, and I believe he specialized in neurology and neuroscience. So this is basically him retelling some of his most strange cases as a neurologist, and some of the weird happenings that he interacted with. And I just think some of these stories are so fascinating, especially with how the human body works and just the neurodivergence of human beings and what some of the crazy syndromes that they can develop. So like I said, Oliver Sacks is a great science writer. If you're looking to get into it, please check him out. He has some great works. I also recommend Hallucinations as another jumping in point for him. But for him, I think The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is probably hit my favorite piece that I've read of his. Number 8. Now, yeah, like I said, if you've ever seen Joe Rogan, or you've just heard the memes about Joe Rogan, this next book is talked about on there all the time. and this whole realm of science and that general and biology, and that is the psychedelic drug realm. And that book is DMT, the Spirit Molecule, by Dr. Rick Strassman. And this book's such an interesting one because it was before the big drug ban that happened in the late 70s, I believe. I think it was like 79 maybe. And so they allowed Dr. Strassman to study the effects of DMT and some of these psychedelic drugs and their effects on the human being. So you get a lot of interesting stuff. So it's got that science element in it. It's got a lot of talking about what's going on with the human body, and it's really just him recording his studies and talking about what happened. And there's a couple chapters that are super interesting when he starts talking to his participants after they come out of their psychedelic like trip, trance, whatever you'd like to call it, and just listen to them talk about their psychedelic experience, I found super interesting. And then the fact that an MD is telling you about some of the medical aspects of it and how he conducted the study and everything, just super interesting to me. So like I said, that is going to be number 8 with DMT, the Spirit Molecule. Check it out. Now, number 7, this one really surprised me because evolutionary biology is not really generally my forte, but this book really blew me away to read. And like I said, that's why it's going to come in at number 7 for my year. And that is going to be Elizabeth Kolbert's The Sixth Extinction. And like I said, I'm very disappointed in myself because Elizabeth Kolbert was at Ohio University and spoke here when I was in undergraduate, and I just didn't pay attention to who it was and when it was happening. It wasn't until later, after I read the book, that I even realized that she was here speaking, and I'm pretty mad at myself for missing that. But there's always next time. So The Sixth Extinction is about the current mass extinction event that we are undergoing, and it talks about like some of the warning signs, and talks about like some of the South American tree frogs and certain like just different populations that we're starting to see as like our canaries in the mine. And like I said, I'm not usually big on evolutionary biology, but this one is so fascinating, especially when you start talking about mass extinction events. And like I said, it's definitely worth checking out, and I want to talk about it more as well. Now, number 6, it was my November book of the month. And that is going to be Kylie Baker's Keeper of the Night. And let me tell you, like I said, I have a full review on it. I spoke about it in my November 2021 wrap up. So go check those out. Excellent, excellent book about a minister of death who goes to Japan and is looking for her mother and trying to find her place in the world, and what goes on quite the adventure. So like I said, check this one out. It's definitely worth a read. I think it is. It's Kylie Baker's debut novel, and I'm excited to see more from her in the future. Okay, now number 5, I don't have because I borrowed it from someone, but it is going to be In a Dark, Dark Wood by Mrs. Ruth Ware. And let me tell you, this book was super interesting to me as soon as I found it at the bookstore with my sister years ago. So the cover of the book, there's nothing on the back, just quotes from like people who've read the book, and they're like, it's spectacular, it's this. And you open it up, you open the first page of the book up, and it jumps right into things. You have no idea who these people are. You have no idea what's going on. But it just starts with like this. I believe the first sentence is something along the lines of like, I was running through the wood, and like it just kicks off there. And like I said, I'm not going to give too much more than that, but it's a big suspense thriller that I think is very well written, and written as like a whole. And it's not super easy to figure out where it's going and what's coming next. But like I said, it's definitely worth checking out, and it's earned its spot as number 5 for my books this year. Now, number 4 was the first ever book review I did on this channel, and that was Frank Herbert's Dune. Spectacular piece of writing. It's historically significant, and it's one of the most recognized and beloved sci-fi novels of all time. I think there's so much going for this book, and the only reason that I feel like on some years this could have been my number 1 book of the year, but there's just 3 books I read this year that I thought were just immensely spectacular. Not to take anything from Dune, but like I said, this book's excellent, but the only reason it's not higher is because there's 3 I had to put above it. Number 3 is Mr. Jeff Vandermeer's 3rd book of the Southern Reach trilogy, and that is Acceptance. Let me tell you, when I finished the 2nd one, I had the 3rd one already bought, and I started it the same night that I finished the 2nd one, and it just wraps it up. I feel like this answers all the questions you have and leaves you feeling satisfied with how that trilogy ends, and it just puts the bow on the series. I think it's just caps it up, fits so nice, and it's just it's a very fitting ending to this trilogy, and it answers all your questions. It's very well written, in my opinion, as far as just the different styles that it goes through. And like I said, definitely check it out. I think the Southern Reach trilogy is great, but this book put it over the top for me and is clocked in at my number 3 of the year. Now, number 2 is my last nonfiction, and it's a memoir, which honestly surprised me, but that is Mr. Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. This book is funny, it's heartwarming, it's enlightening. There's so much in it that there's so many stories that are just great lessons. Yeah, I think like just the story of how he wrote it, the fact that he went out in the desert for like 2 weeks and just sat in this like shack alone and wrote this, going through all his old notes and just wrote this like memoir, and just the lessons that you can learn reading it and just hearing him talk about it, and just like genuinely like I have this physical book, I have it in an ebook, and I've listened to it in audiobook, but I think I'm gonna buy it on audiobook finally, just because it's so great. It really is. Just listen to him tell it is just spectacular. But definitely get the copy, because it's basically a journal, so it has a bunch of pictures, and it's almost written like a bullet journal at times, just how it is. So like it has pictures of his notes and whatnot. So definitely check it out, because it's a fun read that's gonna fill every avenue of emotions that you could have, and it's just one of the best books that I read this year. Now, the number 1 book, I don't know, I'm honestly surprised that this is my number 1 book, but when I'm looking back on my year of reading, this book still hangs around with me. And I think that's just really something that captivates like a great book, in my opinion. If it can like impact me and like leave its mark on me for the long term, then I know that book has done everything that a book is supposed to do. And that is Mr. Tommy Wallach's We All Looked Up. So this is a book I want to do a full review on, but just to give you a little taste of what the book's about. It's set in, I believe, Seattle, and there's these high schools, seniors and juniors and stuff, they're going about their lives. All of them, they have their own, they have flaws, they have their, like, where their life's going, and I feel like every character in this book is so relatable, but they notice a meteor in the sky, or like a comet, and well, like NASA realizes that it's an asteroid that is bound for Earth, so they know they have 8 weeks to live, and it's the story of what they do with their last 8 weeks on Earth. They all know that they're probably going to die, and it's just a very touching story. Like I said, these characters are so relatable. They just hearing their arcs and how their lives come to be in this like final little bit. It's a book that really has just touched my heart, and it's definitely left its mark on me, and I'm just very happy to have read it this year. I finally got around to it. I think I've had this book for 3 years and not read it, but I read it this year, and it has earned its way to the top spot of my 2021 reads. So that's my top 10. What did you guys read this year? What's your favorite book of the year? What's your least favorite book of the year? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll probably see y'all next year.